Welcome to a new bonus episode of Conducting Bills. Today we will take a look at the Moldau in the bigger framework of Ma Vlast. Let's get started. Now, given its popularity, Vltava, the Moldau, is often played as a standalone piece. This naturally extrapolates the piece from the large context of Ma Vlast, the cycle of 6 symphonic poems, of which Vltava is the second one. Now, although the river's journey through the country is a perfectly convincing interpretation of the work when played on its own, by looking at it in a larger context, we can see a deeper programmatic idea of it. Now let's start with a quick overview of the other symphonic poems. In order, we have Vyšehrad, the legendary rock towering over Vltava. It's the oldest seat of the Czech princes. The local settlement was established in the mid-10th century. Vltava, the Moldau. Šárka sets to music an old legend of a knightly maiden burning for revenge upon the entire race of men. From Bohemia, woods and fields describes the beauty of Czech countryside. Tábor describes the most famous era of Czech history, the period of the Hussite Wars. And finally, Blaník is named after the mountain Blaník, inside which a legend says that a huge army of knights led by St. Venceslas sleeps. The knights will awake and help the country in its gravest hour. The theme of this poem is worked out of the Hussite theme. In the end, it will join with the Vyšehrad's theme in a final apotheosis of a resurrected people, closing musically the entire cycle. František Bartoš, an important editor of Smetana's works, points out that there is specifically nationalistic ideological content to Ma Vlast. Stressed national tendencies resulting naturally from such circumstances of national struggle, its conflicts and ardent optimism, indicating a great future for the nation, are the reasons why the work is fully understood and appreciated only by Smetana's countrymen. It has become a national sacrosanct to which the whole nation turns in times of crisis. For this reason, too, a foreigner can comprehend only with difficulty the specific ideological atmosphere of this most monumental of Smetana's works. For Bartoš, the work is not simply a pretty postcard, but is imbued with the Czech culture and identity. Historically speaking, at the beginning of the 19th century, the Czechs were a minority. Their identity as a people was diluted in the multi-ethnic and multilingual Austro-Hungarian Empire. The empire, naturally, tended to Germanize everything by banning the Czech language from the state institution, for instance, or by putting censorship on Czech culture. As the fortunes of the empire started to decline, nationalist sentiments grew in different eras, from Bohemia to Moravia. The Czechs remained under the empire until World War I, but their battle for a national identity kept growing, especially in the form of cultural battles. Aside from the uprising in Prague in 1848, most of the expression of Czech nationalism were intellectual and cultural rather than political. And from a musical point of view, it developed in the research of a unique national style. Smetana was raised in German education and with the German language. But after the Prague uprising of 1848, he became a fierce nationalist. Actually, he was involved in the revolt as well, composing patriotic songs and marches for the National Guard. In the next decade, during which the Austro-Hungarian Empire tightened the censorship, Smetana moved around a lot, traveling and working abroad, especially in Sweden. And when the first theater dedicated to Czech works opened in Prague in 1862, Smetana permanently settled there with the idea of writing Czech operas, among other works. But while many critics advocated a national style based or derived from folk songs and themes, Smetana was looking at the contemporary trends like Liszt and Wagner. His idea of a national style was a combination of both, the usage of typical Czech musical fingerprints within the framework of modern musical developments. And some of these fingerprints included dance-like rhythms like the Furiant, with offbeat accents, frequent changes between major and minor, parallel thirds and sixths, modal scales with lowered seventh and raised fourth. Smetana applied these ideas to most of his works, starting with the operas. But while in the operas belonging to the 1860 decade, he still had to circumvent the censorship, Ma Vlast falls into Smetana's last compositional period, when the expression of Czech national culture and pride had somewhat stabilized. To a point, of course, as we've seen in the episode on Dvořák's 7th Symphony. Even though the individual poems can be performed individually, many critics are of the opinion that Ma Vlast makes its greatest impact when heard as a whole. The connection between the first and the last movement of Ma Vlast gives the work a circular unification, but there are other connection points. Vishrad and Charka both deal with historical legends. The Moldau and From Bohemia Woods and Fields deal with the landscape of the country. Tabor and Blanik share the Hussite story besides being formally connected by an attacca. This obviously suggests a reading in pairs, alternating a piece of history with a description of a landscape in which the events happened. In the final movement, the mountain is a great part of the legend. The poem, therefore, becomes a synthesis of both aspects. While Vishrad and Vltava are formally coherent movements, Charka and From Bohemian Woods and Fields are formally fragmented. They are antithetical to the first pair. Tabor is the most fragmented, and while the ultimate synthesis that brings everything back together falls on Blanik. If we compare Vltava with From Bohemia Woods and Fields, we can clearly see this process. They share the outline in terms of landscape connection. But while structurally speaking Vltava follows the conventions of a rondo, From Bohemia Woods and Fields has a very loose ABA form with no real formal divisions. The orchestration is also quite different. In Vltava is mostly light or very well balanced, and the other poem is mostly thick and heavy. The most obvious parallel is within the landscape choice. Water in one case, land in the other. One less obvious is the viewpoint. In the Moldau, it's the one of a tourist looking at various scenes of a Czech life. In the second one, the viewpoint is one of a young country girl. This implies the personal experience of a Czech rather than a foreigner. It's another element of opposition. Now, the parallels and oppositions between Ma Vlast's paired movements show that there is a much deeper intent going well beyond the program notes of each poem. It's something that should be kept in mind even when extrapolating the work and performing it as a standalone piece. Now, as a last curiosity, I will leave in the description a few links to the theme used for the Moldau in different settings. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button right below this video and ring the bell so that you will be notified every time a new video comes out. Let me know in the comments what you think about this video, if you have any suggestions for future ones, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of this series. In the meanwhile, please continue to enjoy music and be well.